Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm coming to you live from the frozen tundra that is Northwest Louisiana right now. We're happy to have you here with us. I have my partner in crime here, Kayla, and welcome to Criticality Live, presented to you by Secure Nation, the show where we cut through the noise and challenge assumptions and talk honestly about the state of cybersecurity today. All right, first, I got to give a shout out to all the folks at cybersecurity at Barrett Firearms for this sweet, sweet Hawaiian shirt that they sent me. Awesome stuff. But enough from me. Let's get to the real reason why you're here. Our guest. This is someone who has been doing a lot of really cool stuff in the cybersecurity and pushing the industry in ways that I don't really even understand yet. So let's get to it. Today's guest is Vera Spragg. She is a SOC supervisor at SAIC, supporting a massive amount of government service contracts. Before cybersecurity, she was a combat medic and a sheriff's deputy, operating in environments where decisions have real consequences under pressure, where they're mission focused, and she brings a new type of operational mindset into cyber. Calm under pressure, mission focused, and absolutely allergic to security theater. Vera didn't stumble into the field, she earned her place into it, and she's here to talk about what real resilience looks like, and we're happy to have her. Welcome to the show, Vera.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute privilege to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And I just want to let everyone know I am in San Francisco Airport right now, traveling. So I'm going to be going on and off of mute a bit. If it gets really loud, just someone on LinkedIn or something tell me, and I'll try to make sure that I mute. But thank you so much for joining us today, Vera. It's a pleasure to meet you. Just learning a little bit about your background. I see that you've worked as a combat medic, a sheriff's deputy, and now you're a SOC supervisor. It's quite an amazing career history there. So what was the moment that you realized that the battlefield had changed and that cyber was where you needed to be?
Oh boy. That one's actually multifaceted. Can you actually hear me okay? Because it looks like I'm not able to address which mic I'm on. Okay.
Yes.
So
5x5.
Okay, perfect. At least for me, when I look at anything from IT to security to human anatomy, there's a lot of correlation between the two, or three at that matter. So obviously my background is quite all over the place, but every time I've moved from one job to another and had looked at careers, there's also a lot of things that are kind of common. There's a lot of things that you could take from one role and apply that skill set to another. So when I was looking at options of being able to do things outside of my job in the military, I was like, I'm actually kind of interested in doing things more garnered towards national security. And so when I was looking at the field, I was like, okay, well, what is that going to be like? I was able to get an IT job, and I was like, you know what? I actually have an interest in this. Let me go pursue a degree in cybersecurity and start working down that path. So then I was able to work for a UARC, which is for us, was actually a DB contractor. So we did a lot of different things with them. And then I ended up getting a role at SAIC, and that one was specifically for the FAA. So I kind of really got deep into the Fed space there. And then I moved over onto this contract, which it's a multi-client. So I'm kind of getting that MSSP kind of experience as well. But at the root of all of it, there's a lot of similarities. Like IT and cybersecurity, you're really defending the infrastructure of an organization. You're defending something that is the infrastructure of the nation, depending on what you're actually doing. And I think at the core of everything I've done, clearly my interest resides mainly in national security itself. So I'm kind of just pursuing, what it is that can fulfill that kind of, I guess you can say, passion for me, right? What I actually want to do and can say at, the end of my life that I accomplished this and I assisted in this.
That's amazing. The complementary skill sets that you just touched upon, it has been kind of one of those underlining themes from the past few weeks of the leaders that we've spoken to as well, about how security tends to gatekeep, and having complementary skill sets such as your own. You're setting quite the example here for people that would love to move into this field and are not quite sure how. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
Good. Go ahead, please.
Oh no, I was just going to say it's definitely not like an easy transition. I think a lot of people just need to kind of, like, I don't want to necessarily say put yourself out there, but you kind of do, right? You have to start talking to people like, what are they doing? What are they interested in? What was their pathway? And you're kind of being able to, I guess, gauge wisdom from them and kind of get different targets that you can try this, you can try this type of approach, you can think about things differently. And that's kind of how you find what it is you want to do, the specific niche you want to go into. Like without that exposure, you're not going to be able to figure it out without just drilling and really tinkering with different things and hoping, something really vibrates with you and resonates. So one of the biggest things my dad taught me when I was younger was, get wisdom from people who are older than you, people who are doing different things. Doesn't matter what their job title is. You might not think it's relevant. You might think they're lesser than you, but the fact of the matter remains is you can get that knowledge and wisdom from everyone. So when you acquire that, now you can put that into practice yourself and to learn from other people's mistakes. So I really, really strive to do all of that.
Yeah, so let's pull on those threads a little bit. You came into cybersecurity after doing stuff that is wildly different, combat medic and sheriff deputy. What were things that you noticed that people who start in tech just tend to miss just because they don't have that broader background?
I want to say for the most part, and I feel like this is something that the industry as a whole has kind of targeted and it has kind of corrected over time. Like typically when you think of IT or cybersecurity, they're kind of behind closed doors. You don't really see them. They're heads down, they're doing their work. I would say the most successful piece of the skill sets I've acquired is the people orientation, being able to understand people, being able to understand problems and the problems that people face, because everything is human integrated, whether you're looking at a system, whether you're looking at any kind of issues going on, there's a human element on there. So I've seen at the core that you need to understand humans, you need to understand their perceptions, you need to understand biases, you need to understand their approach, whether it's anything malicious or it's a just someone using their computer day to day. You need to be able to kind of break that down and take a look at it and kind of see different pathways of what they're thinking, what they're doing, what they're feeling. And that way you can actually get into the root of any kind of issue, really, and be able to rectify it.
Yeah, without a doubt, cybersecurity is ultimately a very human psychology focused practice where you have to know what people do, what motivates them, and what gets them to click the button. So, unfortunately, we tend to focus on all the bits and bytes and the blinky lights and lose sight of that. And I think your background lends to seeing the humanality.
Definitely.
Did you ever feel underestimated coming into cyber from outside traditional tech pipelines? And
Mhm.
if you did, how did you get yourself through that?
I have to say, I guess for me, it's going to be a little bit different, right? I am kind of one of those people, and the reason why I've gotten to where I am is because I'm that person that's, I guess you could say, more of a type A personality if you think of it, right? So I'll go above and beyond whatever it is I'm doing. So even if someone had underestimated me, it's usually like I have a natural tendency to go outside of the box of what it is I'm doing. I volunteer for everything. I will work after hours. I'll work weekends if I need to. I've worked multiple jobs and still did school. So it's kind of like it was never a matter of what someone else's perspective was of me. Like you can have whatever opinion, belief that you want of me, but you still cannot stop me, right? You can't control what it is I'm doing. You can't control what it is I'm studying. You can't control, when I'm volunteering for additional work or additional projects or kind of bridging gaps with people. You can't stop me from being successful. So even if you underestimate me, it's kind of a your problem, not really a my problem.
I love that. That's tenacity through and
Yeah.
through, and resilience as well. I mean, we always hear, and I don't want to take it down this road too far, but we always hear about women coming into the field and feeling very um, out of place. But I think the mentality and the approach that you take to your career is commendable, and I think I think you're a role model for a lot of folks, no matter what their background is coming into the field. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. So we've talked about moving through some just very different environments, all of them super high pressure, all of them very mission driven. And that experience doesn't change or doesn't really shape what you do. It also shapes how you lead. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about leadership as kind of a broad topic, and specifically what it takes to really lead people when the stakes are high and the room is full of stress. So in a
Mhm.
livestock, panic is absolutely contagious. How do you personally set the emotional tone when things are going just completely sideways?
Mhm. I think that one, that starts realistically, if you want to break it down, that starts before a situation transpires. Before you have any kind of issues going into a workplace or something situation is happening, or maybe there's alerts coming in, there's something you need to respond to, you need to already have a baseline with people. So for me, that's conducting one-on-ones with them, getting to know them, and then also being able to kind of reach them at their level of where they are, and then slowly over time being able to build up any kind of gaps they have, any kind of process they need, documentation, training, whatever it is that I need them to learn and kind of implement. So that way, when things happen, one, they already trust me. Two, they've got a kind of a more of a foundation of knowledge on how to approach things, maybe how to think of things, how to kind of catch things that might be in between the lines. So that way, when things hit the fan, you have that trust, you have that knowledge base that empowers them, that makes them feel more confident. And then they're also confident that you're going to lead them. Even if things are a mess and things don't go well, they're like, hey, you know what? My leadership has my back, right? My colleagues have my back. And I think that's really important that you make sure you implement that 24/7 with everyone, right? You have to have that kind of rapport with them. You have to have that support for them, and then you'll find that when those things happen, doesn't matter what the outcome is, you're going to be successful, at least with your people.
Yes, building trust with
Yes.
with your staff is super important. So then how do you balance, I guess, the authority that you need to have in the SOC, but also the leadership? So
Mhm.
how do you earn leadership without abusing authority? Do you have any advice in that respect?
Yeah, I have quite a few. I'm trying to think how I want to narrow this down. Um, there's a big difference, I would say, when you're like, let's say, for example, what I already talked about, when you're meeting someone at their level, that's not to say that you're kind of having like a peer, right? That means that there's always an undertone of respect. There's always an undertone of listening and not just listening to respond. And then there's always a tone of that mentorship, right? There's a big difference between how I approach people I mentor versus like my friendship. So in order to keep those two separate, you do need to be careful. And that's kind of a fine line. And that's going to be more individual based. I consider a lot of things to be more individual rather than you're going to follow a specific structure. But being maybe able to, I guess, lead by example has been one of my strongest capabilities for leadership, is that I'm able to say, hey, this is, the metric requirements. Hey, this is our expectations. I'm meeting this day after day. I am leading by example. You're seeing me do this. I'm actively telling you. I'm supporting all of you. I'm also requiring for you to have this. And that also means you have to catch issues early, right? If you want to have people to stay on target and you don't want them to kind of see it as, oh, Vera will be okay if I do this, like we're cool, whatever, is you have to catch it before it becomes a problem. So if I notice somebody's maybe slipping in some areas, I'm already having that one-on-one with them. I'm having a coaching session with them. I'll get them additional training if I need to. I'll see what gaps they might have. I might see that somebody else is performing really strongly in this one area that they're maybe struggling with. I'll have a conversation with them like, hey, what is it that you're doing? Then I'll go take that back to the person that I was just working with. I might have them do a peer to peer coaching too. So it's really everything is more, being that proactive person versus being reactive, because the more you allow things to kind of accumulate, the less respect you're going to get, the less you're going to be seen as that leader, and you're not going to be able to differentiate the friendship and leadership piece.
Yeah, I think you touched upon it previously as well. There's a lot of different personality types in a security team as a whole, but in particular in the SOC. You
Mhm.
have um, people that are deeply technical, or you have folks that are, they know that's a lot, like the SOC is like a launching pad for a future career in
Mhm.
security, but elsewhere. In previous roles that I've had in leadership as a CISO, I've had to navigate neurodivergent employees who told me they did come to me and tell me that. It's not a presumption I was making. And we worked together on how to make sure that we were navigating the day to day, but also the bigger picture. And I think that's really important to have those boundaries that you say, because you want to be like a friendly face, but you don't want to also be a friend where they think they could take advantage of you. It maybe not even on purpose, like not maliciously, but just by the nature of what friendships are. So I think that what you've touched upon there is extremely important as a leader.
Mhm. Definitely agreed. Yep, it definitely is helpful, but I would say also it helps when you have a military background where that's, really commonplace. You're working with these people day in, day out, but you still report to them, right? They're still like, being friends with you. They might still be making jokes or whatever, but when you slack off or you're not doing what you're doing, you're going to be put in your place very quickly, right? And obviously in the corporate environment, you're not going to be at that level of putting someone in their place. So it's kind of being able to assimilate that into like the civilian world, as they say, right? Because you don't
Yeah.
want to be harsh, you don't want to be cruel. You're going to have people that don't have a military background. You can't just come in and be like, hey, you need to do XYZ, toe the line here, do this. You cannot do that. So realistically, yeah, right, you have to be able to get to know that person and get a feel for who they are, and then you can broach it that way.
I know for me, that was a hard transition when I left the military after 20 years and going into a civilian environment where not everyone was ex military, and being able to have that very clear delineation between, okay, this is Josh and whoever, where we're cool, we're having a conversation, versus when it's okay, things have gone sideways. I'm now Josh, your boss, and this is not a time for, haha, joking and smoking type thing. We need to get business done. Um, so that was something that was very hard. You can't go in and start knife handing everyone and going, what the hell are you doing, airman? It just doesn't work. Um, so let's kind of think about that from a different perspective too.
Mhm.
SOC work is largely procedures and checklist. How do you balance that with judgment and intuition when seconds truly matter? I know that I've sat at an alert and seen something and went, per the checklist, this is okay, but there's still that thing on the back of your neck that goes, this isn't quite right. So, how do you balance those in your teams?
It's interesting, right? I'm probably going to come in from this more of like a help desk approach since I'm just transitioning into the SOC, but I see there's a lot of like correlations between the two, right? And it's kind of going back to what we've already talked about. It's kind of like that empowerment piece, right? You can have the documentation, you can have it completely and clearly done out. It could address a whole bunch of things, but there's always going to be an anomaly because you can't always be prepared for everything. So I think for those types of situations, one, making sure I'm available for people when they, see something, they might be like, I'm not 100% sure this is going to tackle the problem, resolve the issue. Maybe there's more we need to do. But it's also that like kind of like empowerment piece. I want anyone to not follow documentation, but I also want them to be able to see where there might be gaps and feel comfortable enough and empowered enough to be like, hey, I don't think this is enough. Hey, I think this also needs to be done. And try to think of it in that way, right? Because as we know, the adversary is always growing. You can have all these different methodologies in place, you can have all these processes in place, you can check mark everything, and it still will not do nothing. So it takes that human element to be able to be like, I'm actually seeing these things are a little awry. It's a suspicious, right? So then I need them to start thinking outside the box. So that's also the portion where it's like you have to make sure you're upskilling your people. Like I always have conversations with people like what are your kind of interests, what's your natural talents, and aligning them with those. Because when you go with your natural talents, you're going to be far more successful than other areas. And oftentimes I find that there's specific things they really want to learn, and as I push them to learn it, I give them resources to learn it, they're like, actually, you know what? This fits in the role right now. I could start doing this. Hey, I just learned this. Do you think this is something we can do? And so that ends up kind of being like, they're getting the growth that they need, and then we're kind of getting some growth too as well back from them.
Yeah, to your point, it's really about knowing your people and knowing what motivates them, because not everyone's
Mhm.
motivated by the same thing. Some folks, it's purely give me the paycheck. Other folks, they want the public praise. Other folks want to do cool things. They want to do new and exciting things. And when you're able to give each person the thing that truly kind of ticks their box a bit, it can be truly astounding on what you see.
Mhm. Definitely. Agreed. There's a few people, like I've been conducting one-on-ones, and it's like I have conversations with people and they're like, I really still want to do tech heavy stuff, but I'm kind of like in the leadership spectrum. What is it that I can do? And I'm like, well, actually, there's still a lot that you could do both. Like you could move to security engineering, but if you're going to move into security engineering, also think about the cloud security portion of that, right? Kind of think down the line of the next 5 to 10 years. Don't just think about just right now. Don't just think about what you're only interested now. Think about what you're interested in and how you can bolster it for the future. So it's really I mean, security is not one of those things where you just kind of go with the line and be like, oh yeah, you do this and this. Like that's never going to happen. You need to start thinking, what are all the different things. And oftentimes, getting all those skill sets from all over the place is actually really empowering for your next move, and that gives you a lot more knowledge base to excel in your current role itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the way technology changes. I mean, there's a whole new field every. I feel like it's every other month. There's something new to move into in security, and being well rounded in one topic just doesn't cut it anymore. I mean, no one can be an expert in everything, but there's not. I don't know a single person now who's like, I've been in network security since day one, and now it's I'm approaching retirement. It just doesn't happen anymore. It can't. So I think that's a really good point to add. Um, so you've led in uniformed roles, and now you're in cyber. And one of the themes that I've run across throughout my career, and I think it's really kind of hitting a tipping point right now when we start talking about AI coming into the picture, is accountability. So where do you think that cyber teams struggle like the most with that accountability? And do you have any insight to share around like why you might think that is?
Hmm. I would say across the spectrum, and it's not going to be just in cybersecurity. It's going to be in IT, it's going to be military, it's going to be people I know who are completely different fields. I noticed that a lot of times it's the accountability of this is not some people might not like to hear this, right? Because it's going to be multi-tiered, right? There's the business accountability, right? What is upper leadership wanting? What direction are they going? What do they need for the business? What are they asking for? And then you have the technology piece of, is leadership on track with kind of where the business is going? Are we actually, telling them, is this possible? What can we do? And then it's also the leadership piece of leading the people. And what I see, at least, especially since my perception's more based down here, right, not up here, is that I'm seeing that there can sometimes be a difference of opinion and strategy and accountability between the people who are the doers and the people who are middle management leaders, right? It's that the opinions of this might go downstream here, or the opinions of this might go upstream here. And there seems to be that there's not always a unit cohesion, which is a big thing for the military, right? You have to have unit cohesion if you want things to properly work and be able to facilitate work. So it's kind of that, when you're broaching a leader that might be too friendly instead of more of a leader with their personnel, you kind of see that there's a lot of gaps in what they're doing, maybe what the team's responsibilities are, maybe they're doing more than they're supposed to, maybe they're not doing everything, maybe the leader's not being accountable for it. I mean, it's really kind of it's all over the place, and that's that people element, right? Everybody needing to have the accountability for themselves is very important, and then leaders have to also understand and accept that they are accountable for their people. I'm not going to have my employee doesn't do XYZ and then someone comes to me and I'd be like, oh yeah, my employee didn't do it, it's on them. No, it's my fault, right? I am their leader. I'm supposed to make sure that they are as knowledgeable as they are, need to be. They have the support they need. I need to make sure they're on target, and then I need to help them get on target. That doesn't mean I go in and go yell at them. That means I have some things that I need to help build them up on. You're going to have a few like people who just don't hit the mark, but I've found, at least in my own experience, that's a lot fewer than what is typically portrayed. I usually find that it's a lack of knowledge or it's a lack of support that a lot of people don't have that kind of causes them to fail. So I'm a bit biased that it's mostly on the direct leadership, kind of that first line manager, that a lot of the accountability relies on heavily. And that's just my own personal opinion that probably other people don't like.
I,
Well,
I like it.
well, clearly I am no stranger to unpopular opinions. You kind of
Right.
operate at what I call the messy middle point. You have the folks who are, rubber meets the road doing the work, and you have the corporate leadership who are setting out strategy. How do you, when it comes to this accountability piece, translate what the folks below you are seeing and doing into things that the folks above you care about, and vice versa? How do you translate that strategic vision into those executable things that the folks who are sitting at the SOC desk running alerts, and it makes sense to them and it matters?
That's like the $1 million question, I think, for everyone right now, right? Oh boy. So at least for me, right, it's the level of like impact of what you do, right? When you're looking at a business structure and like each team has its own specific function, it's because there's other teams that have other functions that kind of come together as a whole. So at least for me, when I'm looking at, how much are we doing that's positive for the organization that we can give you recognition and make sure they're very aware of it, is me kind of doing, I do more of a cross collaboration approach where I like to talk to other teams, see what they're working on, what it is they're doing, and kind of seeing how we all kind of fit together, especially if it's not inherently clear. And when you're able to do that, you're able to kind of get that rapport with them where you could be like, my team is doing this. My team has been successful in this, right? And you're kind of the spokesperson essentially for your own employees and your department when you're doing that. Because otherwise, they're not going to know it and see it. They just know, hey, this thing is working. That's it, right? So, in order for really impact to be facilitated and known, and also that means failures as well, right? They're going to know both, is that you have to have that level of understanding it to the business impact, streamlining how you're explaining it to your employees, how you're broaching it with leadership, seeing, here's what is possible, here's what's not possible. But when you're broaching the not possible portion, you kind of need a broach of and thinking and start kind of finding ways and methods, say, it's not possible right now, but if we do this or we try this, we might be able to make it possible. It's just right now, it may not be, next week, it may not be next month, but I'm going to start working on this and we'll kind of start thinking about it. And that's when, when cross-functional teams are kind of going to come into play, because it might be something that is helpful for everyone. So, oh boy, that's a big question. I think we could probably spend an hour directly on at this point.
Yeah, but I think you touched upon something that's really important that I don't really see often in a SOC, and that is a business relationship manager type relationship, where you have SOC analysts, maybe not, not tier one, but maybe tier two or tier three, someone with a little bit more experience, who can go and work with the business and really understand the business use case and what keeps them up at night. And how does that then translate into the operations of the SOC? And what can the SOC do to help alleviate some of that stress? Because then you're able to have proof of ROI, and you're able to have that person as an ally when you inevitably, as a security leader, go back and say, I need money for people, more process, more technology, whatever it might be. And oh, it's going to help HR or finance or customer success and sales. And here's how, because you already know what
Mhm.
their concerns are. So I think that's probably one of the most important things that I've heard anyone say in the past, like since 2026 started, over the past month, that the SOC should be paying attention to the business and get to that granularity with their partners. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's becoming a more common perception, right? At least when I'm going through like LinkedIn, I think people are now understanding more and more how IT and cybersecurity as a whole kind of impact the business and really enable the business versus I think, you know, I don't want to say this in kind of like the wrong way, but typically when you look at traditional education, the way they kind of teach IT and cybersecurity is in a silo type effect, right? Because you can only cover so much in a core structure. And in order to go into the business aspect, you're pretty much going to add another degree program at that point, right? So I think being able to get people to think in that way has become more of a word of mouth, more of a mentorship, more of a getting into the business and getting exposure to it. So I think it's more now becoming a common, topic of interest than it was previously in like the past decade, like when I started cybersecurity in school.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can have the right people, you can have the right mindset, you can have the right leadership even, but when the bad actor, pulls the trigger and wants to do something bad, if you don't have the right technology and the right processes in place, you have dashboards that are all blinking green lights and telling you everything's good. What survives contact with that first real incident, and what falls apart when things get loud and things go crazy? So, thinking about tooling, what tools or processes do you think really earn their keep within a SOC, and which ones look great on a demo or a slide deck, but absolutely fail under pressure?
Oh boy, that's a difficult question. Because when you're looking at like software and technology, you're really going to look at, what is the business? What's the size of the business? What industry is the business in? What, allocation of finances do we have, right? There's so many different things that you need to look at. And then you got to look at the risk appetite of the organization. You have to really square that away. You have to develop that business continuity plan. You need to have a disaster recovery plan. All of those come into play no matter what software packages you use, what fancy thing, someone sold you. I don't think particularly that there's any tools that I could confidently say, hey, this one's better than this one, because I really do think it belongs within that environment. And that might just be because I'm too new into the environment itself to have a more concrete opinion. But I do think it's really important to think of the business, think of your team, think about, what resources do you have? What talent do you have to build it? Because I see a lot of companies will buy something, they'll buy something new and shiny, but they don't know how to configure it. They don't know how to maintain it. They don't have the personnel for it. And those are kind of the things that you really need to think about because that's your long term success. And when you're able to do that, you can stave a lot of things and a lot of threats inherently just by having that. And then having those continuity plans, having those recovery plans, so that even when things hit the fan and everything fails you, you can at least get back up and running.
Uh, Vera, you're saying all the right things to me because I'm a GRC person. So I am so happy. I feel so validated right now. So because, I mean, one of those topics we could probably discuss for an hour is like GRC and the impact on the wider business, but talking about the business continuity aspects and disaster recovery and risk appetites and thresholds, I think that's absolutely paramount to having a successful cybersecurity program. But my question to you is then, how do you evaluate your SOC successes and failures? Either, SOC metrics that you feel really reflect your security, or is it just activity? Do you have KPIs, KRIs? Like what's your flavor of risk reporting?
It's kind of going to be a mix of all of that. At least for us, right? We have very specific contractual obligation with our clients. So we have, what the clients want, what they expect to see, and those are obviously important, right? Those are the things we promise. That's what they're paying for. That's what we need to satisfy and fulfill. But then we also have here like our internal SLAs as well, right? Then they have a variance from it. And it's evolving over time as like the desk itself is growing. And it's very similar to what we did in the help desk environment, right? As time goes on, we start noticing trends. And the more you can kind of get that data over time, you can kind of figure out, what is it that we see from our intake? Because it could be your organization. If you work directly just for your organization doing a SOC, what you see is going to be somewhat repetitive. There's going to be variances, of course, but you'll start to be able to gauge based on data and based on looking at, what is common in a threat landscape for your industry, what is being reported, whether you're looking at CVEs or whatever, right? You're taking a look and seeing, what is the efficacy of X, Y, and Z happening? What is currently trending? And just you're going to build those metrics kind of off of that. You're going to look at the performance of your analysts. You're going to see how long does it take them to do XYZ, right? What is an acceptable level of time that we're willing to allow for something to stand before we're able to rectify it? How much threat does that present? What is the cost of that threat? So gosh, that's really difficult to answer because I will always see things as more of an evolution thing. You're going to kind of gauge it and then you're going to implement it as needed and need to be ready to evolve that.
Yeah, well, businesses ebb and flow, right? So your risk appetite
Mhm.
one day is not going to be the same as it is the next, even sometimes hour to hour. So I think you've hit the nail on the head with that one.
Yeah.
So let's double click on that a little bit, talking about metrics. How do you identify folks who are trying to game the system a little bit and, maybe cherry picking alerts that are super easy and closing them out to have that super high ticket close rate with the super fast rate, or the folks who are, clicking that they actioned a ticket, but they're not actually doing anything for, a couple minutes or hours later, just because the metric says, how quickly do I pick up the ticket? As a leader, particularly with your background in the help desk side, how do you manage those types of things in the environment?
That is also another multi-million dollar question, right? And that's a bit more of a hands-on, right? When you're looking at things, especially metrics, it's kind of when you consider any kind of when you're thinking of economics, right? And people go based off of statistics. Well, the first thing they taught us was that statistics can be skewed, and that's the same to be said for metrics as well. So you're gonna want to be able to watch, and the primary way I do that is I take a look at what is everybody kind of working on, and I look at, what is their tickets looking like? What is it that they're doing? What are they actually picking up? What is their documentation looks like? And you're not going to find a tool that does that really for you, right? You're going to have that hands-on piece of looking at things and not just looking at those metrics to gauge performance, but actually regularly taking a look. You don't have to look at absolutely everything because, not everybody's job's going to have that much time. But if you're pulling out tickets at random, like ad hoc QA style, you're usually able to kind of start seeing, where's the consistencies. You have to monitor your people, and that's not to say micromanage them, but you can catch a lot of times, like I've had people, right, where you have to put them on a pip, sometimes you have to let them go, but in the mass majority of cases it was, as I said earlier, right, there was gaps in their knowledge, maybe there was gaps on the importance of the business, or perhaps there's something going on in their personal life that's kind of affecting their current work and what they're doing. And so the human aspect and being able to be compassionate, where you want to differentiate, when you have empathy and compassion, right? Because empathy is kind of the difficult area of you can really hone into and become less of a leader and more of a friend, just having empathy, where compassion is kind of the PowerPoint for a leader, where you fully understand where they're coming from, what they're going through, but you're also making sure that you can get them and hold them to a standard. So having that compassion is really important. But yes, unfortunately, you're going to be more hands-on in monitoring it because people will game the system if they can. It's not everyone, but they will. So it's best to, make sure you're ahead of that because then you're also able to get them to be far more successful down the line.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
and
absolutely seen that repeatedly through my career where if there is a way to game the system, someone will find a way to game that system.
Yes.
Well, along those same lines, how do you tell with your team, or what you've experienced in other similar roles, like a help desk? I think is very like adjacent.
Mhm.
How can you tell if a team is understaffed, like under resourced? Is it the people? Is it the process, technology? Is it just your metrics? Is there anything that really has like really stood out to you as being that indicator that you need more resources?
I have seen all of that be an issue. And I feel like everything I say is always like, it depends, right? Because there's so many variables at play. But I want to say, when you're able to kind of look at the work and look at what it is you're actually doing for your team, your department, your contract, and you start really honing into certain areas, whether you're looking at playbooks, whether you're looking at, what technology are we using, looking at, what are the next 1 to 2 years, 2 years kind of looking like for the contract. Do we need more people? You're able to kind of gauge it because you're going to be taking those inherent metrics, and then you're also going to be looking at the actual performance, and then you're also going to be looking at the intake of what it is you're getting. So whether it's all the security alerts coming in, whether it's all the tickets coming in, whether it's all the calls are coming in, especially when you're first starting out and implementing a program, you're kind of doing it ad hoc, hoping that perhaps you have some data, but you might not. But when you have that data to rely on, you're able to kind of predict, here's what we could see. Here is, the percentage of acceptable work that we think someone can do in like a workday, right? Like I think I don't remember exactly. There was like an article talking about, you have X amount of days in a year for work, you have X amount of hours, but not everyone is able to do, 8 straight hours of direct targeted work. You're looking at a variance between 60 to 80% of the work is getting done, while there's, that kind of like area where they're kind of like, just trying to process everything. They're trying to think through things. Everybody's human, we're not a machine. So you have to kind of finagle the numbers and think about what is the least amount of acceptable work that somebody is doing versus what we think their maximum can be. And then you're kind of trying to figure out what is our acceptable numbers? What is the acceptable percentages if numbers don't work, especially when predictability is an issue, like at a SOC, right? You're not going to always be able to predict, obviously, how much is coming in. But if you're looking at, any kind of specific shift, at least in my opinion, you could look at the shift as a whole and all the people within that shift. Take a look at, what is the level of work at that given day and what percent of people kind of pick it up. And then you can also look in deeper, right? Which ones are people picking up? Are they picking up the easy ones, the difficult ones? What are we seeing? So, yeah, just another, it depends, right?
So, with the it depends answer, if you had to redesign a sock from scratch today, what would you prioritize first? Visibility, tooling, staffing, process, and why?
I think the most important thing, probably because you're going to need data, data is at the core of everything you're going to do. I think the most important thing would be tooling, just because the people can't do much in terms of the best possible outcomes without the tool, right? The people are extremely important, but without the tool, you're going to burn them out. You're going to absolutely smother them. And so that's where I think the tools are really important. So that way you can utilize them to protect the people and be able to actually provide for the people and work. And then you can grow it from there. But I think that a lot of people kind of, maybe not a lot of people, but I've seen like perspective where people believe that, the people are the most important and they just kind of need to do the work, right? They think people are important, but they're not thinking about the people fully. So that's where I think the tools kind of supersede that, because as a leader, I'm looking to also protect my employees. I'm looking for them to be successful. And in no way, shape, or form am I going to be do that if I don't provide them with the proper tools, if I don't provide them with the proper procedures, if I don't provide them with the proper resources. I'm just setting themselves up for failure. And then I'm also setting myself up for failure as well. And that's going to follow them typically when people have, a bad experience or perhaps not the proper leadership that tends to follow them throughout their entire career. So I'm not going to set them up on a failure trajectory at that point just because I didn't provide them what they needed. Because I also can't say, hey, you're not doing the work if I didn't provide the resources or training for you to do it.
You mean I shouldn't just be giving my analysts nothing but raw logs and all the logs? I should have no tool that normalizes those and standardizes those, and maybe I can set alerts around it. That's crazy talk. I just need to throw more people at the problem.
Oh gosh. I mean, you could. I just, I would wish you well on that one.
Yeah, good luck. So I agree with you on that. I mean, I think I've agreed with everything you've said so far. But when you start talking about this upskilling and or reskilling or the training piece of your role as a leader, what technical skills do you wish more SOC analysts or maybe even yourself had invested in early in their career? Is there anything that stands out for that?
Yes, I would say, and it's not just in the SOC, right? Even when I was in IT, I would say that there needs to be more understanding of networking in general, whether it's the foundation of what networking is, what it encompasses, the tools, because when you're able to understand networking very well, whether you're in IT or cybersecurity, that's how you're actually able to really understand more of what you're looking at and what issues may come up, especially as you're growing in your career. I have noticed that that's a big gap. And I could say for me directly, networking is pretty difficult. I spend more time learning things in networking probably than any other area where I'm like in the books, like, I'm sorry, let me read that again. Quite literally. So I would say that's definitely one of them that I think is really important. And then the other one being the foundation of cybersecurity. I think people really also underestimate the importance of it because I think what a lot of people might not realize when they're looking at whatever role they're going into in cyber, they're gaining all the knowledge and things that they need for that role, which is really important. But I think that they don't realize the foundation of cybersecurity kind of covers many facets, if not all facets of security. And in order for you to really be effective in what it is you're doing, you have to understand how it plays in the whole. So that's where I kind of look at, my own personal studies. I take a look at it, and it also is what I want to do later on is be a security architect. But I like security architecture because you're looking at each function. You need to have a baseline understanding of each, and hopefully you dive in on, multiple different areas. But in order to really understand how things are going to go and really drive things forward, you have to understand all of it. But I think the foundation is often skipped as well for cyber.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I think you're right on. A lot of folks like to try to skip straight to being a tool engineer and not understand why you need to build the tool or what the tool's actually doing. Um, it's insane that folks don't understand basic networking and can read packets the way they are. Uh, those foundational skills just make you better as you grow up in the field.
Yep. You're able to see more. You're able to really grow your skill set more. And I think a lot of people haven't necessarily realized it. But it is also, it's a matter of the environment, right? It's difficult to get into cybersecurity. It's difficult right now to find roles, right? So there's a multifaceted thing, right, going on there. But it's also kind of the thing that we need to really drill in on with people who are currently in the field and people who are entering the field that going back to the basics is going to benefit you in everything that you do.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think it's been 12 hours since I said that on a panel. So, so I think that, again, you hit the nail right on the head with that one. It's definitely the basics are incredibly important. And I mean, I haven't been in the field as long as Josh has, but, over a decade. And I have to keep telling myself to go back. I have a bookshelf full of books of, for cybersecurity. And every now and again, the same as you, I open it up and I'm like, what did I just read? so,
Yep.
so yeah, I think, yeah. for sure. So Vera, like we always end Criticality Live with like a set of core questions, and these are the ones that kind of give our audience those practical, take it with you insights that they can use straight away. So my
Mhm.
first question for you is, if you could fix one thing about the cybersecurity industry overnight, what would it be?
It would be emphasizing, probably, and this might be a bit more controversial, but it would be emphasizing to organizations that you need to have 5, 10, 20-year plans on, replacing your talent. So especially for entry level, you do need to consider training them, right? You do need to take that into consideration because you need people who can do things long term, not just for the right now. And I feel like there might be a little bit gap, and that's just my perspective. But I think that's a big issue for the industry as a whole, realistically.
Yeah,
You
succession
mean we can't
planning.
just you mean we can't just hire all mid-level engineers right from the start and go from there?
I'm not sure they want to come out of retirement either for all that. I'm going to be honest.
And AI is going to take care of all our entry-level roles, right?
I've not gotten many very intelligent responses from AI, in my own opinion, so I don't quite think so.
See, yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So my question is, what's one practical, technical, or cultural thing that you wish that the industry would stop doing right now?
Technical or practical? Hmm. I would say stop throwing money at tools willy nilly and really think about it, because if you're giving your workers so many different tools that they need to look at, work with, try to enhance, try to implement, they're going to spend more time on the tooling than they are the work. And I've definitely heard a lot. I've not had to experience it, thankfully, but I've heard a lot of people talking about that being an issue in their organization.
See,
Yeah.
now that is a controversial hot take.
Yes.
Vendors everywhere just ears perked up and said, "What?"
I ignore all of your messages. Please stop messaging me.
Like you just burned down RSA and Black Hat.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the world is going to end. But no, to your point, I've seen it a lot of times where it's an organization has 20 tools. They're using maybe a 20th of what that tool can do. Six of them overlap with each other.
Yep.
And if I just pared down the number of tools I had, I could hire more people to actually do work because my
Mhm.
that money could be directed into people, or God forbid actual training the people so they know how to use those tools.
That would
That's
be wonderful.
yeah, yeah. But you mean those overlapping tools aren't defense in depth, Josh? Come on. Sorry.
I
See,
mean,
this is
not when
this is
there's four of
controversial.
them.
Not when there's four. Oh, that's funny.
So Vera, you're active all over the industry. So for our listeners who want to follow your work or reach out to you, what's the best way that they can contact you?
Probably LinkedIn directly. Like I get messages from people on LinkedIn pretty often, and then I'll respond. Like I have my YouTube. I've not been consistent with it, but I'm also typically jumping onto work nights and weekends and doing studying. I do need to actually start building that out. But LinkedIn's the easiest way. And then if you're a veteran, or if you are somebody currently serving or a spouse of a military member, you can reach out to me and schedule with me one-on-one on 50 Strong. It is limited to veterans and etc., as I stated. But LinkedIn for anyone outside of that scope is usually the best way.
That's great.
All right. Before we let you go, do you have any thoughts you want to leave our audience on cybersecurity leadership, building cyber resilience for 2026 beyond, or any other thoughts or maybe unpopular opinions?
I mean, I could say what I tell everyone kind of in my one-on-ones is, going back on what I kind of mentioned earlier, is start thinking about what you're interested in, but also take a look, what are your kind of like difficult things to learn. What is it that you're naturally good at? What is it that you're interested in? And take a look and see, how they intersect. If you could be really creative with that too. You can also, like I said, ping people, go ask questions, ask people who are in those roles, ask people who are posting. I've noticed, at least for me, when I've been more active on LinkedIn the past 2 years, I can get pretty much almost anyone to tell me their perspective, opinion, whatever they've done, right? A lot of people tend to kind of reach out on LinkedIn like, oh, like I'm really interested in a job. And it's like, well, first kind of build a reputation with them, start asking questions and start getting answers, and then bring that into, your plan for your career and start thinking, not just the right now, but long term. Sometimes you need to just get your foot in the door, but you still need to be doing things outside of work to upskill. And that's kind of one of the hard things I had to learn in IT, trying to transition into cybersecurity, was that my job itself was not going to get me into that next role. I did have to sacrifice and dedicate time outside of work in order to get to where I am now. And that has been helpful. And I know a lot of people will say don't necessarily like volunteer for everything. It depends on your leadership. But at least for me, when I've had good leaders, when I volunteer for everything, it comes into fruition, whether it's a year later, 2 years later. And that is why I've pretty much gotten promoted almost every single year this far. So really start to think about, what it is I can do, what can you enhance for where you're currently working, what can you do if you got the role you want, and start kind of thinking about, a business plan of how you can do it. And that's kind of how you start providing that value of why somebody should hire you. What can you provide a value to them, to your colleagues, to your team, to the company?
Yeah, and you're also making yourself visible when you do that
Mhm.
cross functionally. So someone might want to, steal you away for a special project or a role on their team, and to your point, that's just getting you more experience that you can leverage later on. Um,
Yep,
so yeah,
My
exactly.
entire cybersecurity career was based on me saying yes to an additional duty as an airman. So the power of
Yep.
yes is strong.
Literally. I mean, I can say like very much confidently, like 100% confidently, that all of my things that I've always done extra everywhere I went, even outside of IT and cybersecurity, has gotten me to where I am, or has gotten me lessons that helped me to where I am. So I do think it's a very good thing to be kind of that overachiever and that person that's like, I'll do this, I can help the team, I'm gonna, you know, try to bring you guys kind of like a solution and support.
yeah. All right. Well, I think, that's a wrap on this episode of Criticality Live. Huge thanks to our guest, Vera Spragg, for being with us today. And an even bigger thanks to all of you for hanging out with us and being a part of this growing community of leaders who are done with the buzzwords and are ready for real conversations. If you got value out of today's episode, hit that follow button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop us a review here on LinkedIn, Spotify, or on our on demand YouTube channel. It helps us more than you know. And of course, a huge shout out to our sponsor, Secure Nation, for powering this conversation. They're helping organizations defend smarter, respond faster, and make cybersecurity something that actually works. So go check them out. And this has been Criticality Live, where we cut through the noise and get to what really matters. See you next week.